Hello everyone, you got Marcel here. Hope you're all having a great day. The topic of this video is going to be revolving around something of a numbers game. Allow me to clarify, back when I was younger, when I was actively dating, I used to personify or view the dating market as a number I could break down mathematically. Here's an example, but keep in mind these numbers are being pulled out of thin air. Every environment is completely different, and the potential for a guy to hook up or meet a woman in that environment varies depending on his status, on their status, and how they interact in the first place. But let's say, for example, that he's in a college setting, and out of all of the women, which would be, approximately a little over 50% of the population there present, out of all those women, let's say 1,000 of them would be the ones he would pass in a particular day. He walks past 1,000 women. Of those 1,000, 250 of them would be dateable in any sense of the term. So they're not already having a boyfriend, they're not specifically lesbians, or have any particular mental difficulties that make them completely unapproachable or undateable in the extreme sense. Right? Does that sound reasonable? A quarter of them. Now, out of those 250 women, let's cut the 10% out that would really interact with him in the first place. Now, I'm pulling that from the 90-10, although some people would call it the 80-20 rule, whereas the top 80% of women go for the top 20% of men, that concept. Well, for the benefit of the doubt, I'm going to go ahead and go with the more extreme version. So only 10% of those women would interact in a romantically driven way. Now, we're completely disregarding looks or quality of the woman. We're just saying numbers, purely numbers. That drops us down to 25 women out of 1,000. Now, I would wager that out of 25 women to choose from, the average blue pill guy or the average guy out there just trying to date could probably find one that he'd be interested in. I would also guess that most men that are out there dating are either trying to disregard these numbers, in the sense that they will approach any woman they find attractive and not keep into mind what her particular interests or what her attainability would be, or they might even be considering it on a subconscious level. Now, I'm not going to say I've gone too far into concepts like pickup artistry and dating coaches, but I would bet a lot of their methodology has to do with tapping into those numbers and either finding ways around them, finding ways to work the system better, but most importantly, finding ways to get that guy speaking to more of those 25 women out there, which means they have to sift through the hundreds that are not attainable. Sound about right? Well, if you're kind of following me with that little example there, I'm going to take it now and I'm going to completely flip it on its head. I'm also going to give what I think is a really solid example as to why some men may be going MGTOW. How many of you have ever been to an actual auction? I've been to a few, especially when I was younger. I went to a church that frequently had them for some reason. You'd go in and they would offer items up and you would pay in tokens or coins or even actual money in some cases, although not through that church. It's the same thing as when you're bidding on something through eBay, just in real life. I would almost say that in real life it's more competitive, If somebody outbids you, you can actually look over at them and see their eyes glaring back at you, and it's like, what? You didn't just outbid me. And that is entirely the intent of the auctioneer. It's why a lot of the old ones used to speak really quickly, get people pumped up and excited where they don't think as rationally, though those paddles go flying up a lot quicker. Well, if you love auctions, I might just spoil the concept for you. Have you ever considered that when you win an auction, you were the only person in the room that was willing to pay that much for the item? How does that make you feel? That literally no one else believed it was worth more than that. To the degree that all of the excitement and adrenaline and drive to get it wasn't worth it. Sure, I suppose on the chance that the auctioneer or the person that was hosting the auction put it in a very poor area, there wasn't a lot of people there interested in the item, well then maybe you got lucky. But for the most part, that's not the way it works. It's designed to get the most possible out of every individual who's willing to pay. And yet, of course, men's competitive nature, or people in general, their competitive nature drives them to achieve something, to achieve the goal of receiving the item. And then once they have it, it's up to them as to whether or not they feel any buyer's remorse. At that point, it's too late. I consider the dating market, when men are out there hooking up with women, whether it be romantically or otherwise, to be approximately the same concept. See, the women dress themselves up, they get all fancy, and they go out and show themselves off in the hopes that the best man possible will come to them. So for those out there who are dating a woman currently, or, have hooked up or romantically entwined with someone, realize that what that means on average, the majority of cases, that guy is the best man that she is able to achieve at that particular time. The guy who is with her is the best guy that was willing to pay her price to be with her. I wonder how that makes him feel realizing that. It's probably not very comfortable. Now, I recognize in the same sense as the auction scenario that it is possible based on environment, location, or circumstances that the guy is able to get a better woman than he originally or possibly would have because of that environment. Same sense as when the auctioneer maybe tried to sell a really nice thing to the wrong market, nobody would be interested in it. And if the guy found himself a really just heckin' awesome woman in a place where she couldn't find anyone better, well, guess what? He won the lottery. And if he can hold on to her for long enough, her value will drop to the point where she won't be able to move on anyway. That is, of course, assuming that the environment doesn't change. It is, remember, a fluid thing. People revolve in and out of everyone's lives, so there's always the potential that the better guy could pop up at any minute. In fact, it happens almost every time. Unfortunately, long gone are the days when a guy can basically sign a solid contract and feel like he owns that relationship to himself. Not in a possessive sense, but that he can rely on it to still be there. It would almost be like you won the auction, congratulations, and anybody that walks by that's willing to pay enough more could still take the item from you. Scary thought, right? So what have we covered so far? Just a quick summary. One could break down the dating market to a numbers game. I think that's a fair assessment. And achieving the romantic level desired with any particular relationship based on the average behaviors of women implies the scenario where the guy is the greatest that she could achieve at that time, the most that's willing to pay for her. How does that all apply to MGTOW? I see it playing out in one of two different possibilities. So when the man disregards, let's say the blue pill man, for this case, disregards his standards in choosing and decides to choose between the 25 women that are available to him at that particular moment. He goes for the best of the 25 that he can get. Considering that's out of a single day, that doesn't seem horrible, right? There'd be a lot of variety there. Well, there are at least a number of MGTOW out there who have applied their own set of standards to the dating pool, where they're unwilling to be with anyone or date anyone that would treat them with a level of disrespect that they wouldn't tolerate coming from someone else that wasn't female, or from anyone else from that matter. A great number of red pill men will have a set of standards that simply nullifies all 25 of those women, where they're no longer available to them as a potential romantic partner or just even a hookup partner, for the most part. In other words, there are some MGTOW who will simply have standards, or that those standards are high enough that there's no one available to them, and that's perfectly fine. I think that all men should start having higher standards when it comes to dating in the first place. Then there is potentially another way that you could look at MGTOW, or that the individual could perceive it themselves, which is the men recognize that it's something of an auction. It has nothing to do necessarily with their standards, but rather that they don't like getting played. They don't like being the only man that that woman could get a hold of or could reach, and that her mindset is that of replacing him at the opportunity when better options arise. That specifically is a crap deal. You know, I've always found it interesting though, if an auction is being ran fairly, and all of the people that were participating in it agreed beforehand that they were each only to pay $1 for the item that they wanted, and they would not outbid each other. If they unanimously came to that conclusion, of course, it would be totally destructive to the person who was running the auction and their ultimate goals of making any kind of money off it. But remember, we're just using that as a comparison here. If every man agreed not to screw each other over with their girlfriends unanimously, just they all agreed on it, then a guy could get with the woman that he actually wanted to be with, and since no other men would agree either by nature, directly, or by the system set up, that they wouldn't screw that woman out from under him, that honestly, it could all work. But people aren't like that. Human nature isn't like that. They're not going to agree. And the way auctions and the way the dating market and women is ran is specifically designed to their favor. It's in the auctioneer's favor every single time. I just find it interesting that the power is really in those that bid. The women may dictate what they want, but ultimately the men are the ones that are in control. It's just in most cases they don't recognize it. We've all heard the phrase, the house always wins, right? I'm not sure at this point whether or not I fall in the category of those who just don't like getting played, or for those who have too high a standards. I certainly have higher standards than I used to, and it may fall on that I recognize poor traits in women that I may have overlooked or not even known existed beforehand. But now I've got the knowledge to see them when they're there, and that just automatically checks them off as someone I could ever interact with more than just a casual hello. If that seems condescending, it truly shouldn't. I guarantee women have far stricter standards when it comes to dealing with men. I guarantee it, on average they do. In fact, I would imagine they would probably get preached to that they needed to raise their standards even higher. No man is good enough, right? Kind of a humorous thought and almost a word of caution when it comes to talking to people at work. An experience I had the other day. So I was speaking to my colleagues. A number of them were married and some of them had girlfriends. You know, it was a little group of people. All of them were men. And I had mentioned at one point I don't remember what brought the conversation up or how I fell into it. It just was a natural conversation where I referred to dating women as them being replaceable. That girlfriends, and not necessarily wives, but girlfriends were replaceable. And the shock and stun on their faces, I even had one of them come up and sort of as a looking out for you bro kind of way, warn me that I needed to be careful in case an SJW heard me, I would get crucified. I looked at him face to face and I'm like, women talk about men like that all the time, every single day, that men are like buses. And he goes, yeah, but they're allowed to, they're women. On the one side, I was disgusted that they can get away with that kind of behavior and that men just go along with it, referring specifically to the double standard. But on the other, it felt good to say that. The one that warned me did ask me why I would have that sort of an attitude that I would say something like that. Keep in mind, my coworkers don't know that I'm red-pilled or MGTOW or anything. I looked at him and I said, because being with me romantically is a privilege. This delusion that the average blue pill guy has of fighting for a woman to stay with him regardless of how poorly she treats him or how toxic the relationship is, that's poison. That is poison to a man, and that kind of attitude needs to go away. Disregarding any sense of hypergamy or patriarchy or anything otherwise, to be with someone in any sense of the term should be a privilege both ways, equally. And any treatment or behavior less than that, less than balanced, is not a relationship at all. It's someone getting used. Scrolling through my memory, I can't think of very many women I dated that actually considered that relationship a privilege, at least from my end. Anyway, I hope that was an interesting video, some food for thought. Let me know what you think down below. Was I onto something? Am I full of shit? I want to hear what you have to say. If you want to hear more videos like this, share, subscribe, hit that like button. This has been Marcel.